Oh, everyone, welcome to the Stoa. Today we have Adam Becker joining us. Adam is a tech entrepreneur or philosopher-builder, as we like to call him, who founded HeadOn, also known as the campus for the world's most important conversations, which includes highly contentious political ones. And I hooked up with Adam, and met him through the AI collective that I'm working with. And he has a really great idea, and he's doing what we've been talking about, the challenge that we've been talking about at the Stoa for the last 5 years. And one way to frame it is the hard problem that he faces, what we're calling closing the meta-perspectival gap. How do people with different perspectives and different capacities to take different perspective engage in good faith dialogue on contentious issues? Um, so the idea of the session is that Adam is going to present um, the idea and to seek the collective wisdom from the Stoa. And you'll present today. We'll have a Q&A. And if we have time, we'll have a collective inquiry, or we might set up that collective inquiry for the next session or another session. And we're here for 90 minutes in total. Um, so that being said, I'm going to allow everyone. And if you have questions, pop in the chat anytime, and we'll get to your question during the Q&A portion. Uh, so yeah, that being said, Adam, welcome to the Stoa, and handing the keys over to you.
Nice. Thank you very much. Thank you. Peter, thank you for doing this. I'm very excited to be here with all of you guys today. And thank you, everybody, for joining. So, yeah, I would like to solicit your guys' collective intelligence powers here. It would probably take a minute because I do want to start by just giving you the full download of kind of like the intellectual mileage that we've been covering with my team at HeadOn. And we'll see how quick we can go through it. I do have quite a bit of slides. I have about 53 slides before we can dive into the collective inquiry part, but many of them are quite quick. So I'm going to share my screen and we could get started. Okay. All right, cool. So I want to talk to you about the meta-perception gap, the meta-perspectival gap, and in particular, how we theorize it and how we seek to engineer systems and infrastructures for correcting this from an epistemic perspective. So I'm just going to dive right in. One key part in virtually every conflict escalation model is that of polarization. So polarization, you have it right there in the middle, virtually in every conflict escalation model, before it leads to violence and before outright war. So if you're trying to avert war, you should probably pay attention to polarization. Now, what is polarization really, and how does it function? Well, in a sense, it produces a kind of vicious cycle, a type of feedback loop, where as society polarizes, that is, as groups begin to harden in their identities and the thinking of us versus them continues to entrench in society, those groups that are drifting apart come into contact less and less, physically come into contact less and less, and digitally, right? Even intellectually come into contact less and less. And as that happens, polarization increases, and that continues the cycle, and it's a vicious loop. So the question that I kind of like just stumbled on, well, could you just hack it? Right? Like, is it easy enough to just hack? That is, just bring the different groups together, the groups that are drifting apart, and maybe polarization can decrease. And over the last 60, 70 years, there's been over 1,000 research papers that demonstrate exactly this. Yes, if you bring people together who disagree, then polarization will decrease. Well, so then you could imagine a little thought experiment. Let's bring an 18-year-old Israeli to the West Bank and bring a 21-year-old Palestinian, put them in a car, driving in the West Bank towards a checkpoint staffed by the Israeli 18-year-old soldier armed with a gun, right? So is this the kind of conditions for optimal social contact? Is this the kind of condition where polarization is likely to decrease? Probably not. These checkpoints are not known for reducing tensions. That's not the case. So what are those research papers talking about? Maybe this is all academic mumbo jumbo. Maybe it's ivory tower. But in the real world, that's not what we see. In the real world, we need fences, we need walls, right? Good fences make for good neighbors, right? I don't know if you've seen this video, but here you can just take two dogs and then put the fence up. And as soon as the fence goes up, they go berserk. And then when you remove the fence, now they're okay again. So it's not very clear. If you look at history, there's a lot of situations where fences and walls simply don't work. And the West Bank is one of them. It's not like tensions have reduced in the West Bank after the introduction of the wall. That's not the case. So the question isn't so much whether contact can reduce prejudice, whether contact can reduce polarization, but when exactly does contact reduce prejudice? What are the conditions in which that happens, right? When does it happen? And the answer to when is in 1944. In Belgium in the Battle of the Bulge. This is in the Battle of the Bulge. What ended up happening is a very fascinating situation. If you guys haven't seen this story, first of all, it was the bloodiest battle in the war for the Americans. You have most of the casualties being riflemen. They were just staffing the front lines, completely unsuspecting. They didn't know that the German offensive was going to come in. So almost all the casualties, like 100,000 men. Severe shortage of riflemen afterwards, especially of white soldiers, and they ran out of white soldiers. Those were the only people that were able to be riflemen at the time. And you get increasing pressure by African American groups to become combat soldiers and to fight alongside the whites. And at some point, when they were cornered and they ran out of people, Eisenhower issues a historic order to start accepting black volunteers, to be serving alongside the white riflemen. And so at some point, this is at the end of 1944, they began to be integrated. The black volunteer platoons were integrated with the white infantry companies for the first time in American military history. And that changed everything. And everybody knew at the time that this is wild, and this is quite different from anything we've ever seen before. So the Army started releasing all of these researchers to go to the field and start running surveys. And they've asked a bunch of questions, they asked dozens of questions, hundreds of questions, and they began to compile all of the answers into a bunch of work, into research papers, into volumes. And you could go and still find all of these volumes, and I want to give you a couple of touch points today about what it's like. So they published this thing, Attitudes of White Enlisted Men Toward Sharing Facilities with Negro Troops. And so they start asking them questions, right? They ask them a question. The Army has not always been able to have special so this PX is post-exchange. It's kind of like a store. They've not always had special PXs for Negro soldiers. Which of the following things do you think should be done about it? Well, so one answer is they should just share it, with the white people. There's no problem. Or other ones are like, well, the black soldiers should be allowed, but they shouldn't be hanging out afterwards. They should just go and buy the thing and then go back to their camp. Or otherwise, they should simply find another store, right? So there's an entire spectrum here, and you could see what the perspective is in the beginning of the war. This is still in 1942. This is before the Battle of the Bulge. What ends up happening here? So we could just go over these if you could see the numbers. So equal privileges among white and northern soldiers, only 24% say yes, they should have equal privileges, right? And if you go all the way to the southern states, it's about 4%. And a majority of them are saying virtually not equal, right? The border states, it's 43% saying just be kept out. They should find another thing, whatever. This is not our problem. Okay, so this is what happens now. Then they ask another question. The question is, this is now after they've served with the black platoons. Has your feeling changed since having served in the same unit with colored soldiers? 16% say, no, still the same thing. Whatever I thought beforehand, I still feel. 77% say, actually, yes, my feelings have changed and they've become more favorable towards them. I feel more respect. I like them better. And note here, no cases were found in which an individual reported that their attitude had become less favorable. That didn't happen. So this is the situation. And when researchers began to pore over this, everything changed afterwards. Everything. It's as soon as they've realized this, all these academics were like, there's something here. We just need to go in and study and excavate and figure out what exactly are those conditions in which this took place. Okay. In the 1950s, some of the people that have been poring over this research and this material, this guy's name is Gordon Allport, and he's like, okay, let me study all these different things. let me study the specific conditions and see what exactly happens. And he came up with these 4 optimal conditions. So these are the optimal conditions for social contact. According to Allport, it became one of the mainstay theories called contact theory. And he says the following: we need 4 conditions. We need equal status. That is equal status, not just outside in society, but equal status in the interactions, specific interactions that we're having. In the Battle of the Bulge, we're all fighting, equal status. That is, the Germans don't discriminate. They don't differentiate. We were just all Americans to them. Equal status. Second is shared goals. They're fighting together. They have the same goal. Their goal is victory and survival, right? So that's the shared goal. Intergroup collaboration. They need each other. In this case, and institutional support. It's not just of their own accord. In this case, Eisenhower himself issues the decree. He says, this is good. We should all be fighting together. So if you think about it, what contact theory has sort of become is like it's a function that you feed into it all these different factors, all these different variables, equal status, shared goals, and what you're trying to predict is a certain probability of prejudice drop. That same number that we saw, the 77% of that's the probability of what we're trying to model. Okay, so the problem is maybe you could do it in the context of war, but outside of that context and outside of a lab context, this is fairly difficult to engineer the conditions where you could check off all of these boxes. So researchers started doing a different thing. They started saying this: okay, what if I only have one? What if I only have equal status? What's going to happen to the probability? What if I have 2 of them? What if I have this in the intergroup? They started playing around and they realized, you know what? Forget about optimal. Maybe it's difficult to get optimal in the real world, but let's at least get facilitated. So these are conditions that help, not necessarily optimal, but they help. So this is now the situation as we find it in the 50s. In the 60s and 70s, we started identifying even more variables. There's about 8 variables in the late 60s, and there's a ton more by the 80s. And my projection is that this is just continuing to explode. I mean, just the world is becoming so much more dynamic, and our identities are so much more nuanced, and there's so much going on here that this is, and we're not just operating in real life. Right now, everything is mediated digitally. This is becoming very, very difficult to model if you're trying to build a theory out of it. My intuition was that maybe the modeling should be done, first of all, with a very expressive function, right? So just feed in. It's okay. Just give it all the variables that you can and do it with a deep learning model. And then you can start to build up the data set and try to predict whether a probability of trust will increase or prejudice will decrease. Fine. We're tracking. The goal of an AI in this case wouldn't just be to be the machine learning model, but to modify the conditions. Maybe I tweak this. Maybe I turn this dial. Maybe I manipulate the conditions so that I can generate a lot of data and then use that data to build a policy to figure out what to do when and how to optimize the conditions for social contact. So the goal here becomes building an AI system that can adaptively learn the optimal conditions of social contact, right? So this is how the AI interfaces with machine learning model, all of them together, producing a system for optimal social contact. Okay, so you can imagine, you can almost build a little schema of it, and it could sort of look like this. And I'll tell you how it is that we're tackling this problem, but I'd want to open it up. Anybody should just brainstorm along that same kind of like line of thought. So you can bring in a bunch of users, and you need to get them attracted to some type of social experience. And then just simply dynamically optimize those social experiences and track what it is that you're going for. That is the reduction in prejudice. And just figure out a way to do this. And I'll show you in a little bit how we've begun to approach this problem. But that's schematically what it should look like. The challenge here so far is I said the probability of increasing trust or reducing prejudice. How do you actually, like these researchers in Europe, they go and they sit with the soldiers and they ask them a bunch of questions. But how do you actually picture operationalizing a concept like this? This is not all that obvious. So you need to unpack the concept of trust here or prejudice in at least a few different ways. And in the literature, they tend to do it into 3 different dimensions. So the first dimension is the epistemic dimension. It's like what you think about the outgroup, right? So it's like, I think that the Jews are trying to control the world. Right? I think that Palestinians are Nazis. That's what I think they're anti-Semitic. That's what This is at the level of like my epistemic, my cognitive kind of awareness. Next is the affect. It's how you feel about them. Yeah, maybe I think the Jews are trying to control the world, but I kind of like them, right? Or maybe it's about how you actually interpret that outgroup and how you feel about them, which is distinct from the epistemic. And last, it's how you act with respect to that knowledge. So, for example, I feel totally fine towards Black people, and I think nothing of it. And nevertheless, when I walk on the street and I see a Black person on my side of the street, I'm going to cross over. So that's still at the behavioral level, right? So you can unpack this prejudice into a few different dimensions. Operationalizing any one of those in a machine learning model also doesn't sound very obvious, especially how you're going to do it in a digital web platform. That's not that obvious. I have a theory here, which I think the theory of mind accuracy is the one metric that we should be trying to optimize. That is, in some ways, you can think about this as a unified theory of prejudice as misperception. That is, I think that if only we had a good theory of mind of the other person, that is, if we actually knew what they think, if we understood where they're coming from and what they're saying, first of all, at the level of the epistemics, it would be easier because if we can accurately predict their beliefs, I can't hold systematically false beliefs about that group. This is almost by definition. Affectively, too, as soon as you have a better predictive power, you're going to reduce emotional threat responses. For the most part, affective polarization and affective prejudice comes from threat. That's the number one predictor. If you feel like you're in a situation that is genuinely threatening, you're going to hate the other group. And last is behavioral. The fact that you are threatened by them and you feel threatened by them tends to be the thing that is triggering the behavioral aggression. So what I'm proposing is that the theory of mind accuracy is like the one metric that we should be looking at. And it's also a very convenient metric from a machine learning perspective. It's continuous. I can measure the delta between my predicted beliefs and somebody's actual beliefs. I can say, okay, he gets it 70%. He gets it 99%. So it's easy, it's continuous, it's not just binary. And first of all, it's measurable, right? Like you could just go to person A and say, hey, what does B believe about X? And then go to B and ask him, what do you think about X? And that's it. I can just measure the difference. It's generalizable. It works across conflicts and cultures and political divides. I'll put a caveat here. I think that it still requires modulation. I think it is still very much culturally and contextually dependent, but nevertheless, it has a generalization that I think is useful, and it's sensitive to change. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. It does change after some relatively slight, short interventions. You're able to modify things. And as we saw earlier, it is correlated with various outcomes, and we're going to get into that again in a minute. Okay. The other point worth noting, this is an observation, that our theory of mind right now, as individuals and as society, absolutely sucks. It's really bad, and we're not very good at understanding where other people are coming from, and it's produced a meta-perception gap, either at the level of the perception or the level of perspective, right? So either we don't understand the perspectives of other people or we misperceive where they're coming from. So we have a meta-perception gap, and I want to demonstrate this for you. For a second, just give me a second to sit. I think my throat has gotten a bit dry. I've been speaking fast. Okay. So look here. So you go to a bunch of Democrats in the US and you ask them for their perception of where Republicans are, right? So for example, if you ask Democrat, oh, you guys can see it, nice. If you ask, can you see it? Is it too small? How are we feeling? Because I see scribbles. We're good?
Is someone scribbling on it?
I see a bunch of scribbles, but it's all good. Okay, so Democrats' perception of Republicans. So you go to a bunch of Democrats and you ask them, if you were to ask Republicans, what percent of Republicans do you think would agree that, for example, there's racism that still exists in America? And by and large, Democrats' estimates tends to be that about 50%. 50% of Republicans would agree. Well, in reality, it's over 80%. Same thing about properly controlled immigration is good for America. Ask Democrats, they think it's about 50% of Republicans. Well, it's over 80% of Republicans. So we're just consistently getting this off. We're consistently wrong about this. This is not unique just to Democrats. Same thing can happen with Republicans. So you go and you ask Republicans where they think the Democrats' perceptions is, and they get it wrong. They get it wrong. I think when I first looked at it, they got it wrong about double. But look here. So most police are bad. Do you disagree with that? Do you think that the Democrats would disagree with it? They think less than 50% would disagree that most police are bad. Well, in reality, it's like close to 90%. So just consistently misunderstanding the other side. And you could see that this is true. It's not true to the same extent, depending on the topic, but it's reliably true. Now, what happens when you misunderstand the other side? The main problem with misunderstanding is that you're going to pick the wrong tool for the job. Because unless you have a deep understanding and nuanced understanding of even your enemy, right, you're not going to be able to work with them or work on them in the way that is best advantageous for you. So there's a theory here called the power strategy mix, which is very interesting. What you end up getting is you start by classifying different sources and forms of power. So you say, okay, we have coercive power, right? Coercive power, either violence or sanctions, right? Like these things, the people that are reacting to this, they're not doing it because this feels good, right? They want to avert some harm. So this is coercive power. Then you have exchange power. I'll give you this, you give me that. And last is integrative power. Integrative power is like, it's the power to create relationships and to bring and hold people together based on shared values, right? Families, communities. That's the idea of integrative power. We share a culture together. We share aspirations. Okay, now when you look at the different types of people that exist, everybody on the other side, everybody in the out group is not a monolith. There's different types of people on the other sides. When Israelis look at this, they should see Palestinians, there's Palestinians that are persuadable purely by integrative power. Maybe not as many as there are ones that are reluctant persuadables, where you need a mix. This is a particular recipe of how to combine together the different sources of power, the different types of power. So for the reluctant persuadables, yeah, they're driven by the integrative power because it seems to give like an air of legitimacy. But you need to be exchanging something because they don't really trust you, and you need to coerce them a little bit because they should be coming to the negotiating table because it's in their interest right now and they want to avert some harm. Traders, for example, they just switch the integrative power with the exchange power. So for them, it's really more about the trading. Let's see, you give me this, I give you that, fine. The incorrigibles, for example, might just be, let's say, mostly reacting to coercive power. If your entire outgroup was incorrigibles, that would be one thing. Maybe you would pick a strategy that looks a certain way. But when you don't have that, and you actually have a diversity on the outgroup, you should be mixing together the different powers, and you should pick the right tool for the job, and that requires deep understanding. And when you don't understand the other side, you're picking the wrong tool for the job. What happens when we pick the wrong tool for the job? So there's a few consequences that I want to show you. This comes from a paper on why voters who value democracy participate in democratic backsliding. And virtually every country in the last couple of decades where democratic norms have been on the defense, you see that you go and you ask the people, you're like, why don't you care about democracy anymore? They care about democracy. They say, we do care about democracy. It's just that we hate the other side more than we care about democracy. And why do they hate the other side? Because they think the other side is going against democracy. So we have, again, a meta-perception gap here. And let's look in particular what it looks like. So, okay, so you ask, let's say, Democrats, how willing they are to subvert democracy to get what they want. And you see this graph right here, right? This is at the top left. It mostly peaks at like maybe 0.22, 0.23. This is on a 7-item scale. Okay. Most of the people are sort of here, and then there aren't that many people that are willing to subvert democracy completely. That is very rare, just to get what they want. And nevertheless, when you ask Republicans that same question, where do you think Democrats are? It looks like they're peaked here. They think it's like, oh yeah, about 70%. 60-something% of Democrats on average would think that it's okay to be subverting democracy to get their way, which is not true if you ask Democrats. And again, now let's turn it around. What happens with Republicans? So if you ask Republicans, how willing are you to subvert democracy to get what you want? Again, they get it. It's here, it's peaks at what? 0.25, 0.2, whatever. It's in the low 0.2s. And nevertheless, when you ask Democrats, you could see the gap, right? So the gap is all the way here. They think that certainly a majority of them are willing to subvert democracy to get their way. Now, what happens when you show them the right answer? When you show the Democrats that actually Republicans are not where you thought they were, or when you show Republicans that Democrats are not where you thought they were, your own willingness to subvert democracy drops. This isn't an experiment. They question by question, they went through and they're like, actually, you're wrong about this one. Oh, okay. And this next point, you're wrong about that one too. Huh. Okay, interesting. And then you're wrong. Okay, how does that change your own willingness to subvert democracy? Now that you don't think that the other side is trying to do the same thing, and now it's a race to see who can subvert democracy in their benefit soonest. Everybody moderates and nobody wants to subvert democracy. The graph simply drops precipitously, and you can see that for both of them. I don't have the graph here, but this effect even lasts way after the experiment. So that's very interesting. That just demonstrates to you that when you manage to reduce the meta-perception gap, when you increase the theory of mind, you can see actual results in people's willingness to subvert democracy. So if you think about it for a minute, you're like, okay, but what is this misperception a function of? What are the causes of this misperception, and how does it manifest across different types of dimensions? So this next one, you could see that the people that have the highest perception gap, they tend to be on the extremes. Either the most leftist progressive activists, they tend to misperceive the other side the most, as do the devoted conservatives. And the people that are just sort of politically disengaged, they don't care. They have the most accurate sense. The more politically engaged and activated you are, the less reliable your theory of mind is. What about consumption of media? Well, the more time you're on the media, the more you consume news. Again, you are even more incorrect about reality. You have an even worse and more faulty theory of mind. What about the more educated you are? You might think that, okay, at least I could go to school and I could become educated, and that can help. In fact, it makes it worse. The more educated you are, the worse your theory of mind is, at least for Democrats. For Republicans, it's a little bit different, and we can unpack why that might be. But for Democrats, the more educated you are, at least academically, the worse your theory of mind is. This might be a clue as to why, because the more educated you are as a Democrat, the more likely you are to only befriend other educated Democrats. And so your social circle begins to narrow, and you have more homogeneity in the friends that you have. You could see it here. Basically, this is the percent of people saying, almost all of my friends hold the exact same political views, right? And for Democrats, the more educated you get, the more likely you are to say that almost all your friends hold the same political views. That's not so much the case for Republicans. Okay, so now how do you go about hacking this gap? This is a little bit more about the line of work that I've been doing with HeadOn. So the question here is, how do you get millions of people to reduce that meta-perception gap when most factors try to encourage this gap? So what are some encouraging factors? Well, the media consumption, that widens the gap. Educational attainment, that widens the gap. Homogeneous, that widens the gap. And lowering the gap is hard work. What, you need to go and talk to people from there? Who wants to do that? Not a lot of people want to go and actually have conversations that are fruitful, that open their mind, and that expose them to their own fallacies. That tends not to, I think, interface very well with human nature. The factors that discourage the meta-perception gap are the battle of the bull. Okay, well, you're going to go and create a very complex optimal conditions for social contact. That sounds very difficult to engineer. But if you manage to engineer it, that could discourage and reduce the meta-perception gap. So I want to just seed some thoughts in your mind about what are some directions that we could explore collectively? And one of them might just be, okay, just can you make it more of a brand? Can you make it more of a lifestyle? Can you make it sexy to have a deep understanding of where the other side is coming from? Can you make it a challenge? Can you dare people? Or are you able to do XYZ? Like, I don't think you'll be able to do it. Not a lot of people manage to do it. This is really hard. Can you make it a source of status? Wow, only the people that have a really high score, who really understand the other side, we somehow give them some social elevation. You can make it lucrative, just pay people. Whatever, there's a lot of money that goes into propaganda. Just take that money and just give it to people and say, come in and engage in conversation. And if you actually manage to correctly understand the other side, you get more money. Or you make it fun. You can make it more of a game. Or you can make it captivating. Can you really hit some flow state, something that feels immersive and deep and resonating? Can you make it more of a sport where understanding becomes almost like a competitive sport? Let's see who can understand each other better. So anyway, those are some ideas. These are some of the things that we've been playing with, is to gamify it a little bit more. You have what we call a steel bot, right? So let's say, can you make the case for Christianity, say, better than believers? You got 3 minutes, go. And then there's an AI that listens to you as you're on the spot, either like writing, you got 1,000 characters or 3 minutes, and you could just make a case. And then at the end, you'll get a score, and you could see how well you score against the average. It doesn't even just need to be about Christianity. We've come up with a bunch of different ones. And you could go really, really deep and really, really nuanced and precise. And the AI is doing fascinating work here. It could even be something like, I tried the other day, how well can you defend Abu Mazen, this is Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority's decision to walk away from the peace plan offered by Ehud Olmert? Very, very specific, but if you make a case about, if you can make a cynical, ironic case, whatever, on Twitter, well, just see how good you are at actually understanding where the other side is coming from, and we'll have a relatively objective way to analyze it. All of that started leading me towards thinking about things a little bit more from like a gaming perspective. So I started doing a bunch of research on what are the motivations that lead gamers to spend a long time in games. And there's fascinating research, and I'll just point to a couple of different things here. There's a couple of dimensions here that they're pointing to. One is how acting you are sort of independently versus how interacting you are. And then what your interest is. Are you interested in the world, or are you interested in other players? So people that are interested in acting alone but are interested in other players, they might be killers. And let's say there's less than 1% of that. So these are gamers that just want to watch the world burn. On the other side, you have gamers that are interested in other players and are interested in interacting, and about 80% of the people are there. They're socializers. So they want to have good time with their friends, and that's for the most part why they're there in the game. Again, I'm giving you some ideas that maybe you can then draw on in order to help me solve the design of an environment that can help to reduce that meta-perspectival, meta-perception gap. Okay, another one could be, if you're interested in the world, but you're interested in acting alone, you might be more of an achiever, right? So this is, I'm giving you competitions, and you really want to complete it, and you want to get a good score. There's about 10% of those among gamers. And then if, again, you're more interacting and you're interested in the world, you might be exploring. You might be exploring different challenges with different people, but you really just like want to see what the rest of the world is like. So this was a framework that was very popular in the 90s, but then it came under significant criticism because it said, instead of category of users, instead we should think about components of motivation, because every person is not just a point in the quadrant. No, it's not just that. You're made up of a variety of different motivational factors, and we need to look at all of them, and each one of us is some combination of all of these different things. And so they've run this other study here, and they said, okay, well, what are the components? Well, we have advancement. Yes, some people are more, they score higher on advancement than others. Some people are interested in the mechanics of the game. Others are interested in competition, sure. Still others are interested in the socializing aspects, building relationships, teamwork, and others in the discovery, role-playing, customization, and just, this is just escapism. So that was kind of the idea. Another source of inspiration was hitting flow state. I don't know if you guys have seen this flow diagram, but it's I thought it was very interesting. The idea here, and you don't have to focus on most of them, maybe just a couple. So if you consider a specific level of skill, let's say here you have like medium skill, right? Just like right in the center. But the challenge isn't high enough, you're just going to get bored. So you're going to leave. You're not going to participate in this. And if your skill is, let's say, much lower, and the challenge isn't all that much, okay, so you're not good at this. It's not even challenging. This, you just become apathetic. But if your skill is high enough and the challenge somehow matches your level of skill, it's a little bit higher. The challenge is always a little bit higher than your skill. You can end up hitting flow states. And the idea here is that this is you resonate with it, you love it, you're engaged, you're immersed, and you're also open to learning. So this is what happens. How do we design experiences that balance being challenging and nevertheless demanding quite a bit of skill? So this is my final one here. What I would like to leave us with is to reflect on this being our mission, that is to design configurable experiences with different constraints that appeal to different motivations. And what we're trying to do is to create an experimentation sandbox. And I could use ideas for what kinds of experiments to be building. And I can show you what the whole sandbox looks like. I think I need to change my screen. So give me 1 second. Oh man, and now I see there's 30 messages in the chat. I didn't see any of them. I don't know if they were for me, but we'll tackle them in a minute. So, okay. Are you guys able to see? What are you seeing? Yeah. Okay, cool. So this is what it looks like now. This is HeadOn. Advanced through challenges in real-time debating or in collaborative problem solving, the issues that matter most. The idea is that we're going to create a lot of different types of experiences, social experience. Sometimes they're solitary experiences, reframing the issues that matter most. And we want to keep building more and testing them. To give you a sense, this one here is a build the future. We got 90 minutes to draft the 10 principles peace plan for Israel-Palestine. You could see a lot of the work that we've done, and some of my language has been very Israel-Palestine heavy. We started this when a few weeks after the war began, and we're a team of Israelis and Palestinians, and we've primarily been having conversations about Israel-Palestine, a bit over 6,000 conversations now over the last year. And so that's kind of like our initial target audience. There's the meta-perception gap there is just as large, if not larger, than in the US. So it's a very good use case for us. Okay, so draft the 10 principles peace plan for Israel-Palestine. Here, full political solution in 10 years, 90 minutes go. And if you've been advancing sufficiently in the platform, perhaps you can participate in something like this. Or a timeline reconciliation, 1948 to 2024, build a shared timeline of Israel-Palestine, create merged timeline, both accept. Or another one, this one is a build the future experience type. This one is a timeline reconciliation experience type, right? It's like you can think about it almost like a different game. This is a common ground mapping. Is Zionism colonialism? Can you find 5 points of agreement with someone who sees this completely differently? But there's other things, right? So because of your defense of conservative values, this is a red team, blue team, design abortion policy that both sides could live with. One team develops proposal, other identifies weaknesses. Then we switch the roles and improve. Should men have a say on abortions? Again, these are a couple of other common ground mappings. And you could start to run your own solo challenges, right? If you're not ready yet to engage with other people, either in audio or video, and you want to just do it, just testing your own skill here. So, and these are many of the other conversations that had finished. So that's the landing page. And right now we've been building these experiences and rolling them out to our community. And so that's a little bit of how we think we can engineer the conditions for reducing that meta-perception gap and what that might look like in practice. And that's my talk. I open the floor. I would love to get thoughts, reactions from anybody. And Peter, if you want to give me your thoughts, or if you think I should look at the chat,
Yeah.
I'll do that now too. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can, we can send you the chat afterwards as people who are just engaging along with the presentation. And it was amazing. So let's give a round of applause for Adam. I just really love that presentation. I'm going to stop sharing your screen. And what's so cool is that you're building the thing, you're building the sandbox, and then you're actively philosophizing, engaging in all these theories. So it's quite impressive, and quite appreciate that you're deployed toward this. Uh, and so if you have any questions or shares, pop it in the chat. I'll call on you. And I think we'll just do that for the rest of the session rather than move into like a formal collective inquiry. Um, I'll start us off with a few questions. Uh, when we first met, you shared to me what was why you're doing this essentially, why you're called to this, what was deeply bothersome that drew you to this project that's evolving with the more the more that you learn about this meta-perspectival gap. So I'm wondering if we can start there, like on a personal
Mhm.
level, why this?
Yeah, it has been. I think the way I describe the calling has evolved as I learn more. In the beginning, I just thought that, I mean, if you think about it for a minute, it's, by the way, am I frozen? Can you guys still? Okay, we're good. So when the war started, I moved back to Israel where I'd grown up, and I saw people who just it seemed like I walked into a bubble. They were living in a very different world. They were living in a very different universe. The Israelis were, and when I spoke to Palestinians on the other side, I've been engaged in the conflict for many years on YouTube. When I began to speak to Palestinians on the other side, they also seem to be living in a bubble. They're just in a very different type of bubble. And Americans and foreigners, we're just all living in different bubbles. Right? This is not to point a finger. This is just, I think, the reality of the time that we're living in. We're just living in like an age of confirmation bias. And having spent the last few years deeply in AI, I started thinking, what is AI likely to do here? Is it likely to make things worse? Is it likely to make things better? And my default kind of I walked away from that thought exercise feeling that I think AI is 85% likely to make things much worse. And it's going to cater to our cognitive biases and our confirmation biases and continue to just build a more vivid and realistic picture that we would find it easy and comfortable to live in. But I also thought that it wasn't inevitable. I think there's like a 10 or 15% chance that AI could be pressed towards useful service, but if it does it, it has to be now before it starts to take over, and before we're just fully giving in to a very specific type of paradigm that's only advantageous to, I don't know, the big media companies, the big tech companies, I don't know who, but is certainly not very useful for us. And I think that again, not being able to understand the other side is, I think it's dangerous. So this is sort of like one motivation that kind of like just like started that I started with. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, man, we're living through a very momentous time right now. Like we just have like existential questions that we need to figure out as humanity, as a species. What are we? What it should be the relationship between us and AI? What should be done about the climate? How should we handle inequality? What should be new forms of governance? How do we handle the meta crisis? There's so many different things that we have to. And if you think about what are the kind of like conversational infrastructures that we have Twitter. Like it's almost like the worst tool for the job. And you think about it, you're like, this, we've been comfortable in the most important period probably in human history. Now we've given all of the tools and the power to platforms that are just there to try to divide us. That just sounds very, very dangerous. So it's just become like almost obvious that we have to try to re-engineer the conditions for us to actually have social conversation. So it's sort of evolved a little bit. And also, I didn't realize about when we started, I just thought, okay, just bring Israelis and Palestinians and pro-Israelis and pro-Palestinians together into a room and that's it. And I thought that was enough, and it's not enough. And oftentimes it does worse. Sometimes they shouldn't talk to one another. They really only need to be, so we had about 50 people and they were talking and it was amazing. And then we had about 75 people or 100 people and the whole thing started breaking down and became way too toxic and people left and it was a disaster. And then we had to start over again from zero. And then again, they left and just until I realized, okay, we have to do this very, very responsibly and very, very specifically. How do you actually engineer the conditions for these things to go well? And it's not that obvious. And anyway, so over time, the talk about finding the optimal conditions for social contact began to emerge, and that's when I stumbled on the research of around contact theory and its current limitations. But that's been kind of the evolution of the motivation.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And I love, the journey that you walked us through. It's like discovering the theory of mind, insight, the motivation problem, which like just the niche meta weirdos that hang out at the Stoa might like to do this stuff on their free time, but most people don't. And then the trying to gamify it. Um, and in that process, personally speaking, like what are the challenges or what's most bothersome to you that we at the Stoa listening or here today could be deployed to helping you with?
Finding ways to hack motivation. That's for sure. And like, as we can get thousands of people, we can get tens of, we can even probably get 100,000 people globally who are just deeply enticed by the prospect of conversation and making intellectual progress. But we're not going to get a billion people. At least and we're not going to get them to do it consistently. Maybe we don't need a billion people. Maybe we need a few millions, but we need to grow the thing. And I need to find ways to do it. Maybe it's by catering to people's sense of status. Maybe it's other social media dynamics that have already been, you know, like tried and true. Maybe it's by making the thing look sexy or gamey or whatever it is. But, and again, it's unlikely to be the same thing for everybody. It's very likely that, like I said, there's a different set of motivations. When I inspect our current audience in our community, I've sort of like detected 5 different motivations for why people engage. The first is just a sense of curiosity. They want to understand, what is the other side actually saying? They're curious to learn more about the space. The second is a sense of they're just lonely. They just want to, even we saw that in like in the other categories. People are just some socializers. They just want to come and hang out. And third is people that actually just want to drive impact. They hear uh, um, a certain narrative in the discourse and they want to push back on it, or they want to propose another one. They want to see the world actually change because of their contributions. And last is, a user once told me, it's intellectual jujitsu. I want to just spar with people and I like it. And other people want to come and watch the sparring, which is fine too. It's okay. I'm not against it. I just think we have to create spaces where that type of intellectual sparring ends up leading to something healthy. But if that's where most people are, we have to respect that, cater to it, and then leverage it towards something good.
Okay. Very cool. So we'll have a lot of great questions. We'll pivot there and ask your question. Doesn't have to be deployed towards what Adam just specifically asked. It could be something, outside the box that could kind of open up the perspective space. And then you can have one follow-up question, a question or share if you feel like called to share something to Adam. Um, Alia, we'll start with your question.
Hi, thank you, Adam, for the presentation. Excellent. Yeah, excellent presentation and really complex work. So I commend you for doing it. So my question is about the foundational assumptions of the model. I noticed that there's probably some paradigms that like are at the foundational axiomatic level of this work, and probably like the difference between people who would use the model and people who wouldn't use the model would come down to some of those axiomatic like fundamental beliefs. For example, moral relativism, conflict being inherently negative, all perspectives being kind of equal and valid. Um, and the follow-up to that is about the distinctions between different groups. For example, ideological groups, like being a Republican or a Democrat or a Zionist or something like that. And then groups that are more based in identity that include a lot of intellectual, ideological diversity, things like race, ethnicity, maybe even religion, which includes a lot of different subsects and ways of interpreting religion. So yeah, that's my question.
Thanks. Peter, should I respond? Can I respond now? Yeah. Okay, so could spend hours on each one of these. So I think you're very perceptive and recognizing that these are things that I think can make or break this. But I also think that there's very new and novel and interesting opportunities now that AI opens up with respect to each one of these things. And I want to zoom into them, as well as new liabilities and vulnerabilities and risks. So when we started out, the idea that I had is, so a lot of people are discussing common ground and trying to find common ground, or trying to get to some agreement and to converge. I'm not sure that's achievable and or even desirable. I'm not sure that I've become a little bit, so like Right now, sure, we do Israel-Palestine. Maybe you could say right and wrong. Maybe you could, but even the objective cases, fine. What about once we have flat Earth people and round Earth? What should be the platform's objective, right? Do we make an assumption that there is a truth out there and that that truth is the responsibility of the platform to drive towards? I don't think that should be it. In fact, I think the AI should not be in the truth business. I'm very, very careful of that, and I think it's dangerous. And I also don't necessarily want them to find common ground. It's not like the round Earth and the flat Earth. They'll say, you know what? Okay, fine. Let's agree that maybe the Earth is flat in some places and then round. And no. It's not. That's not the case. Instead, the only thing that I think is generalizable here is that they should understand the other side better. That's it. What they want to do with that understanding and whether that leads to some convergence, that's up to them. In my opinion, once you engineer the social conditions, you actually build respect for empiricism. You build respect for an intersubjective analysis. You build respect for science, and you build respect for truth. But you don't do it by foisting truth on people. You do it by modifying the conditions in which truth emerges. And so it's a very Popperian kind of perspective. That's the thing that is the underlying this. In my mind, and because of this, we also cannot be ideological. So no model should be at all ideological. We should only be methodological. With the method being more conversation, and better conversation is better than less conversation and worse conversation. That's really the only assumption. And even then, that one metric to rule them all, the meta-perception gap, for all I know, that's not even, maybe there's an even better one to capture, and then we'll identify that. So I think in a sense, it's going to be a little bit of like a cat and mouse game, because it could very well be the case that if you were to go and optimize just for that, you would end up producing emergent pathologies. And we'll be, oh, actually now it means that, and I don't even know what those are yet. So we just have to keep the finger on the pulse and try to identify them and then address those. So that's about the underlying assumptions of the model. The next question was about, I think it was like identities and groups and how we classify. And it's very interesting because in many ways, I really dislike this categorization. I don't like to say this is a pro this or pro that. And I don't want it to even be at the level of the profile. A person can create a profile and say, like, I am a Zionist. I don't want them to ever commit to a label, because then it makes that label even less dynamic. So it's been a bit of a challenge, because they like that. People really want that, and they want to project, and they want to show that they're. But what I do is I make it very granular. So, for example, we don't have Palestinian on the platform. We might have West Bank Palestinian with 1948 roots who grew up in Jordan but now is living in the US. And those layers actually matter for people, and they matter for how they engage in the conversation. And so the idea is, and this is very simple now with AI. Beforehand, it's just, I'm Middle Easterner. No. Now we went to AI, boom, produced 1,000 ethnicities in the Middle East. That's interesting. And combinations of those. And people can get to self-identify in whatever way they want. At the level of the AI, we would try never to collapse identity, but always to see things in a very hyper-dimensional way, right? It's all about the weights of how you express certain things and how you are dynamically evolving within them. I think that's something that we could do with better and better machine learning. In the previous data analysis world, we needed to always collapse categories into just very distinct categories. It's easier on the brain. We don't need things to be easier on the brain. We have the neural networks. They could do all sorts of funky math. It's fine to have very, very large vectors of embeddings about where people's perspectives are. And in fact, it's that level of perspective that actually makes, I think, the AI work. So for example, I used to think that, oh, my theories about the Middle East or whatever would be good to tell Israelis and Palestinians. I could talk to them, it's fine. But no, I mean, many people, we have West Bank settlers, they're very religious. We have West Bank Palestinians, they're very religious. To put a secular dude like me in the middle is gonna make everything worse. And the epistemic distance between those two is much smaller than having to pass through me. We wouldn't know it just based on the tag Israeli or Palestinian, but a very deep and rich projection of their perspective in a hyperdimensional space can make progress there. I hope that gets at that.
Thank you. There's a lot here, and I wish there was even more time, but I know there are other great questions in the chat, so thank you so much.
Thanks.
Simon, you had a question or share?
Yeah, Adam, very interesting presentation. Thank you for sharing with us. So, I had a question about the social whole of society level kind of stratification and incentives here, and to what extent you see opportunity in working at that level, right? Because I think you can kind of frame this question as a psychological question, right? So it's like I've got a settler from the West Bank and he's Haredi, and I've got a specific, guy from Gaza, and so on and so on. And I think that's really useful for understanding the individual. But if we're trying to, I wonder about the sociological and anthropological framing of the challenge. And specifically, I wonder about the just the role of elites and elite personality and elite incentives. And I'm going to end with something. This is going to sound. I don't know if you ever read what Churchill wrote about negotiating with the Palestinians in 1946-47. But I'm going to paraphrase it. What he basically said was, I no longer feel like I can negotiate with them because the leadership class doesn't have the interests of their own people at heart. And so I think about this a lot in our society, not just with regards to the Palestinians, but the sort of the whole of society level leadership cadres and the whole of society level economic incentives. I mean, to a certain extent, we're flying in the face of the attention economy economics. That's probably enough to get on with, so I'll leave it there.
Yeah, there's a lot there and a lot that I don't know how to connect the dots from what we're doing to just actual final impact relative to all of the forces against us. I don't know, but I'll give you a couple of things that I have intuition about. One is I do believe that politics, especially in democracies, is downstream of culture, and culture very often is a function of technology in the product. So we see the world through products. We're mediated and we're modified and transmogrified by the products that we use. And I could see that because when we have excellent conversations on our platform, I look at these people and I'm like, wow, where are these people? How come they're not on Twitter? And then I go and I look on Twitter. They're there. It's the same people. They're horrendous on Twitter, but somehow they're not horrendous here. What is it? What is it about the tools that makes them different? And does that difference then lead to some cultural change that can then lead to some political change? That's the kind of like, and I mean, sometimes we see it actually in real life where people meet on the platform and then they go and actually have shared activism in the West Bank and in different places. Sometimes they hear like we're drafting 10 principles peace plan that ended up going to the former prime minister. Like some of these things actually have legs, but you're right that we're up against some powerful belligerents.
Any brief follow-up share, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, so I tend to agree with all of that. So in terms of your technology product, I guess a question, and I don't think this has to be answered now, but I think this is an interesting question, which is knowing what the incentives are for the attention economy and knowing that a lot of those incentives kind of take us down these rabbit holes. I don't like the kind of big tech billionaire boogeyman view of that. I just think there's a set of incentives that we're living within. And it's like, so how do we sort of alter those incentives in a way where the incentive isn't just to amygdala hijack everyone constantly online to get them enraged, because when they're enraged, they come back and they stay on the feed and then you can sell more advertising. Like that's basically the problem. I mean, so many of our problems come down to that. And so knowing that that is the fundamental mechanism, how can we hack that mechanism specifically, as I think about. And I don't know if it's a question we can answer now, but I always like to think of this in terms of just like fundamental incentives at scale. So not necessarily the individual incentives for engaging, but the scalable whole of society level incentives, and how can we operate within that environment to achieve scale outcome?
Yeah. So okay, so for that, I think I can refine the answer then. So first, I agree that is, I think, the fundamental challenge. So I would unpack it from, there's a distinction then between what makes a person want to engage in something like this and engage in it sufficiently to actually make a difference in the world, versus what does it take for a company and for a tech startup to be pursuing this type of thing at scale, even though it may not be as easily monetizable or there's more lucrative options, right? So I would distinguish between those two. I think for the people, this is equally challenging, right? Even to get individuals to do it. And I've begun to sort of see it a little bit like fitness or like health or eating well. It's everybody's incentive is for us to eat bad food. It's easier for me to sit down and not go to the gym. It's easier for me not to take care of but at the same time, there's a fitness industry and people manage to find ways to go to the gym, and people could eat things other than apples, but they eat apple and they keep the doctor away. So that there is some, maybe it's a cultural knowledge or some norm or some other gamified, even though it doesn't look like it, other types of incentive structures that make people decide to take this extra step, even while there's other incentives for big companies to try to suck us into those rabbit holes that are polarizing and radicalizing us. So that's at the level of the individual. We have to crack that. At the level of the economics, I don't know. Do you create a nonprofit? Does it need to be a for-profit does it need to be a B corporation? Do you need to just select very specific founders with very specific communities and very specific teams that are able to withstand that? Do you not take venture money? Like, what are the types of things that you have to do in order to build that? And I'm still toying with all of these different ideas. So if people have answers to that, but I also am curious, and I'm very curious. I do want to make this a very lucrative thing. And I do think that perhaps with LLMs, there is a new possibility to make a ton of money, enough money to justify staying the lane and staying the course, while still creating the conditions for optimal social contact. If you create the actual conditions where nonprofits and governments and people can come and have actually good, healthy, productive conversation about the future, I suspect there are ways to monetize.
All right. Thank you, Simon. Akil, you had a question.
Thanks,
Akil,
Peter.
yeah.
Thanks, Adam. What a fantastic presentation. And thank you so much for this really important work that you're doing in the world. I had a question related to what you were saying. Your main challenge was motivating more people to do this. And I was seeing your graph, which showed the flow state and the challenge and the skill. And in the bottom left quadrant, you had low challenge and low skill, and that was apathy. And I'm a little confused by that, because today the level of challenge seems really high, but still apathy seems very high as well. So I'm wondering where the disconnect that there is, and how do we move people? Uh, uh, you know, Either upskilling people is what is needed, or is it more about a perception? The challenge is high, but the perception of the challenge is low, and it's not got to do with the reality.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I can even pull it up here, and it's very interesting. So to hit flow, Peter, can I share my screen again? This comes from the flow entry on Wikipedia. So here's sort of how it looks like. Psychologists have found that one's mind can attend to only a certain amount of information at a time. According to this guy's talk, that number is about 110 bits of information per second. That may seem like a lot of information, but simple daily tasks take quite a lot of information. Just decoding speech takes about 40 to 60 bits of information per second. That's about half of the amount of attention that you have just to decode speech. What they say is that the flow state is the optimal experience that one gets to a level of high gratification from the experience in almost the entire 110, where is it? The entire 100, and when one is in the flow state, they're completely engrossed with the one task at hand without making the conscious decision to do so. And they lose awareness of all the other things. So the idea is, how can you fully occupy those 110 bits of information? That's kind of how they put it. And then if you're to look at the diagram, it could be the case that it's just not gamified enough. So you're apathetic because it's not sufficient. Well, first of all, you have apathy here regardless of the challenge level. You have to increase. Sorry, you have apathy regardless of the skill level. You have to be above a certain skill in order to start carrying. And then the question is, how do you gamify or reward or incentivize them to at least crack that skill? And it could just be that we suck at that skill, or it could just be that we haven't even identified what the proper skill actually is. But that's a good question, and I don't know. I think you're right that most people are just apathetic. We just need to get them somewhere. But it could just be the case that. So this is why I think parsing the different motivations is interesting, different components, because it could be that you're just leveraging some other desire, the desire to look cool, or the desire to make money, or the desire to whatever, have a lot of friends, long enough for them to build a certain skill, and now you could put them in a flow state. I really see the role of the AI as more of a recommender of experiences, and who are the people that should engage with you in a particular scenario so that you can have the optimal social contact. And it could be the case that we have to sequence things. For this person, they're not ready to have that 10-point plan. That it will be engrossing for someone with high skill. For somebody like me, I'm too apathetic for it. It doesn't matter. Okay, well, that's not how we're going to cater to you. There has to be a different trajectory, a different curriculum.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, good observation. Nice.
Yeah, it resonates with a talk I had given on the meta crisis, and one person just walked out of the talk saying that this is too overwhelming. I don't know how to relate to this. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, thanks, Akil. We'll have about 15, 20 more minutes of questions. Let's go with Peter, the other Peter, if you're still in the room. Yeah. Peter, if you can unmute yourself, yeah.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Great. I have a question here. I don't know. I want to be upfront about this from the beginning. I don't know much about artificial intelligence, but this is my question. This is a bit ancillary, probably question or problem for further in the future. But if you're successful at creating an AI model that can significantly nudge people to become more tolerant and agreeable to opposing ideologies, what would you put in place to keep it from being corrupted by agents such as political officials, mischievous agents, or government officials with internal access to your model?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's something that people in this space sometimes worry about. It's like, okay, if you were to give an autocrat a depolarization button, well, yeah, I mean, that would be perfect for them, right? Just sometimes the polarization might be necessary. Sometimes it's good that there's different conflicts here. Maybe it signals that there is deep systemic and structural problems that we need to address. So by reducing the polarization, are you defanging progress? And I think that could be the concern. It sounds like a very similar concern to what you're saying. How is it not to then be exploited by people in power who want to resist progress and change? So the answer that I've sort of given is, yeah, exactly. Peter is putting it like Soma, is I don't think conflict is bad. That is under the assumption conflict is not bad. I think it's how we handle conflict that is good or bad. It's the tools with which we're dealing with conflict. We just need to transform conflict into something that is healthy and not something that's pernicious. At this point, polarization is pernicious. It doesn't even allow us to make the progress that we need to make because we're not even understanding the other side. The goal is not to make people tolerant to different perspectives and numb and comfortable with it. That's not the goal. The goal, this is why the goal has to be just to sharpen your understanding of the other side. That's it. If they then want to build relationships and alliances, and that's perfect. But right now they're unable to do it because they're picking the wrong tool for the job because they're not understanding the other side. In the context of the Israelis and Palestinians, for example, I think when the Israelis see the Palestinians as Nazis, they're not picking the right tool for the job. It's bad for Israelis to think that. When Palestinians see the Israelis as the French in Algeria, they're not picking the right tool for the job. It's not helping them. So I have yet to be persuaded that there is a world where deep misunderstanding allows us to make progress. I think it tends to be the case that it's more transparency and knowledge and insight and accuracy will allow us to make progress. So yeah, could it nevertheless be exploited? Maybe. I'm trying to find ways where I could leverage their interest and their money to actually make society better. And it might be the case that we could find it, or maybe you guys can help me find it, but that would be the gold standard.
I understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. We had Shingai. You had a question.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. I appreciate this project. It's like a perfect mix of very ambitious, but you're humble in the way that you approach it, which I appreciate. I feel like I have a lot of engineering friends who want to solve political polarization, and I often roll my eyes when I hear them talk about it. So I love what you're doing. I'm curious if you've spent much time marketing this product specifically to university students. It feels like it could be a good crowd, and if so, have you noticed anything about that demographic?
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much, first of all. It's so when we started, I wanted to see how American college students would react. So we did two things. The first thing is we went to the West Bank and to Israel and started just filming people on the ground answering questions that American college students are asking. So they're submitting questions, and then we just go out in the street and record their answers, put it on YouTube. Got hundreds of thousands of views, and it's still going strong. And we got a lot of interest that way. And then we opened an internship project for American college students, and we recruited about 1,000 interns. And they came and they were having conversations, and a lot of people were skeptical. Oh yeah, like the college students, they don't want to open up, they don't want to have conversations. I did not find that to be true. I found that, like, I think exactly like what your intuition is pointing to, that if you create the right conditions for them where they feel comfortable and safe, they're more than happy to come, and they're having incredible conversations. I think the challenge is for example, at this point, we've had, let's say, Palestinian youth that are coming to speak to like older American Jewish men. They don't make progress. It's a bad fit. They can't understand each other, and it just escalates, and it's not good. And nevertheless, when I'm there and I speak to the Palestinian, and when I speak to the Jewish American, we can make perfect progress. The problem is about the matching. How do you do the matching properly? And I've seen the same thing with American college students too. When you put them in small, also very different. This shocked me. You have conversations one-on-one, or like two-on-one, or like three-on-two. They take on one form. As soon as it's like more than 7 people, I don't know what happens. It's just a complete disaster. What happens? I don't know. You really have to pick and choose the right people and pair them up. But I think so. We haven't yet done marketing because we haven't yet sought growth. So far, we've sought depth. I want to make sure that we're building, again, to the same intuition that you have about like engineers trying to solve the world. I want to make sure that we're building that like actually responsible technology that is doing well and is doing good for the world, and not just roll out something that would just be scaling checkpoints from the West Bank. I think Twitter right now is just checkpoints at scale. We don't want to do that. And but at some point, when we feel like we have a very responsible product, 100% we'll go to American college students too. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Yeah, deeply appreciate that approach. And I was looking at your website and saw that Chris Bale was one of your advisor back in like 2019, 2020, when I was like very much trying to make a difference in this realm. I like stumbled across him on Twitter, and we had some back and forth. So he's a good guy. So I feel like you're in good hands.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, I read his book. He wrote a book on polarization.
Yes, it's a great book. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember what it's called now, but if you do have a second, I want to read to you a quote that when I met him, I posed that to him. And actually, I even just mentioned something similar. I was sort of paraphrasing him. He said, "Oh, I actually don't have it here. It's all right. I'll find it."
It's Breaking the Social Media Prism is the book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. There
I
we
don't
go.
have it here, but it's there's a good quote about oh yeah, here you go. He says, quote, though depolarizing platforms should be an easy sell in highly polarized countries like the United States, if governments don't step in, there's money to be made by entrepreneurs willing to bet that a place where people can build reputations as effective bipartisan communicators will be more attractive to businesses, nonprofits, and governments alike. And that connects, I think, with what Simon was talking about. This is, I'm driven by a lot of his work here. So nice. Thanks for being perceptive.
Thank you.
Mhm. So this might be our last question. Michael, I believe you had a question.
Thanks. I wanted to know if what kind of artifacts have you generated so far? I like your idea that like current social media and attention media doesn't give us any verbs other than this, and then the shouting. And we also don't get a chance to be identified by our actual interests. And the way that you've done that, I think that's very well, especially with the the affective and the behavior as well as the epistemic. Um, so, what kinds of things have you generated out of these conversations? And also, how has the AI helped you identify groups? I know Peter has done something really great about mimetic tribes, and I'd like to see that extended.
Nice. Cool. Thank you. So the artifacts are not that many yet, and I'm open to hearing ideas about what it should generate. So right now we're having a lot of the conversations. We started on Zoom and then Discord and then the application, and we try not to, we've gone back and forth. Man, maybe I could show you some, I don't know if I could show you some. Okay, so one thing that we've worked on is big mind maps and maps of conversation and topics and moves. So we're no longer seeing arguments as man, I wish I could show it to you. I don't have this up. But it's just like, okay, what is the semantic content of what somebody's saying? No, but why are they saying it right now? Are they trying to reframe? Are they trying to shift the ball? Are they trying to cloud the moral? Like, what are they trying to do here? And then we've leveraged another framework for identifying moves. So somebody's saying a thing, and then you're like, okay, got it. This guy is now trying to pull you through the exact same move that they always do about the. And the moment all of us can see it, we can take a step back and we can realize, oh man, actually, maybe I am falling into that same pattern. This
Right.
is going to lead us to another. So creating a visual representation of that. Another thing is almost an essay or report about a conversation without necessarily saying who said what, but how the conversation moved and what was interesting about it and what the motions were. And this remains as an artifact for somebody to go and say, oh man, I missed the conversation. What did that actually entail? You can go and read it. Another thing, oh, maybe I can show you this one. Give me 1 second. No, I don't have. If we had a few more minutes. Another thing that we're doing is creating I never thought about it quite in the same way now, but as soon as you ask this question, all of these, the constellation is convergent. Another thing that we're trying to do is create something that is kind of like, so you know how Wikipedia is almost like a network of consensus by experts. And that's sort of the idea. But what we're trying to do is to see how concepts actually are used socially. So for example, you have a concept like the right of return. Let's say for Palestinians to return back to the land that they were dispossessed from 1948. Okay, you could go and see the Wikipedia entry on the right of return. But what we can generate is, okay, these are the 6 major perspectives on right of return. You have a pragmatic one, people that are asking questions like, how will this happen in real life? I don't understand. You have a legalist perspective, which is like, okay, but what does international law say? So you could see, and then they're all networked, and I could have shown you like a big graph of how they're all connected, and you could just surf through the nodes of concepts and see how they're given social credibility and social capital. right? So it's like, this is how they're used, this is how they're functioning, and these are the different perspectives. Another thing that I was toying with is a song that gets generated after every conversation and put that immediately on Spotify as a playlist. Because I was having a conversation with this girl. This was in the early days of the war. I was calling in from Israel on like one of these chat roulettes. And so she saw the flag of Israel because of the IP address. And she's from like Tunisia, and she was, I don't know, she was 16, 17, whatever. She had her room darkened. She was laying in her bed and she was looking at her phone, and you could see that just like her face was lit up because of the screen, you know what I mean? And she just looked at me and sang the Hallelujah song. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And it's just like the Lucy Thomas rendition. I don't know if you guys have seen like heard this song. And she's just staring at me and singing this song. And I had just goosebumps. You know what I mean? And I'm like, man, music there's something so powerful about music here. Even Peter, when we just started, you play that song. I was like, man, we have to start these conversations with songs. The music is just, so I don't know, like, could it be that even songs remain as artifacts of it? There's many other things that we're trying out, like Miro boards have worked really well. So we're just creating like a big mind map, and then people are coming and like actually architecting things. I love the idea of people viewing the same thing. I think it cannot just be like a solitary audio social experience. I think it has to be visual, has to be primary component there, especially because a lot of our audience is very gamer-like. So they're used to seeing a thing. And the moment we're all looking at the same thing, now we can start to make progress by moving boxes around and collaborating in that way. And those remain as artifacts.
Mm.
But if you have some more ideas, I'd love to hear them too. So I'll
I'm around.
yeah, thanks.
I'll chase you down.
Thank you. I'm putting my email here in the chat too, and my LinkedIn too.
Yeah, and on that note, Adam, we can gently close here. How can people get involved? How can they sign up for HeadOn? How can they help you out? Is there a way that they can reach out to you? Either watching the video or people who attended the session?
Yeah, for sure. Just go to headon.ai. Right now, it's still a closed community, but if you apply, then I'll see you and then bring you into a Discord where we have our team having discussions and meetings and conversations constantly. I do product updates every Friday on that Discord to get a lot of thoughts. All of the brilliant thoughts, anything that is smart that came out of this project has been by me listening to users and me listening to the community. We have to be, for a project like this, I feel like it has to be built very transparently and openly and with a lot of community input. So I do love to talk to people, and I do it at least on a daily basis, and we open it up for conversation on Fridays. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn. You can message me, and my email is adam@headon.ai. There's an error in signing up. Okay, so I'll fix it. And then also we have our latest version is going to be up in just a bit. So let me see when you do. Okay, give me 5 minutes and I'll fix that error. So Akil, thank you very much. But otherwise, my email below, and yeah, I was just fixing I was upgrading the security on the database, and that must have tripped it. So yeah, so oh yeah, that's interesting. So Discord is great, LinkedIn is great, email is great, and if you have thoughts, I would love to just pick your brain about it, and I need as much creativity as possible. So
Beautiful. Yeah, and that's definitely what I appreciate about you, Adam, is the transparency of how your journey in this process. And I've known you for a couple of months now, and how it's slightly changed, and you've been introduced to new ideas and theories. So it's quite a treat to witness, and happy for the Stoa to have hosted you today. And perhaps we can come back for another sessions, and we can continue this collective dialogue.
I would love that. Thank you very much, Peter. And thank you, everybody, for joining and for participating and engaging and taking interest in the project. And Peter, always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah. All right, Adam, everyone, thanks so much for coming to the Stoa today.